So it has been a long time since I've taken a look at a Arch-based distribution. Mostly because once you've seen one of them, you've seen them all. There's very rarely anything new there when it comes to ideas on how to implement an Arch-based distro. They're just kind of rices on top of Arch, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's no sense in doing videos on that type of thing. But today, what I want to do is take a look at CachyOS. Now, I have no clue if I'm actually pronouncing the name right. It might be Catchy. So if you guys hear me say Catchy somewhere along the line, just know that I have no clue how to pronounce this thing. But anyways, this is a Arch-based distro that does some really neat things, and I thought it was about time that I'd talk about those things. Now, like I said, it's been in the Linux community for quite some time. I know a lot of people are very excited about this thing and have actively used it for quite a long while. But I wanted to wait to actually cover this thing simply because I wanted to make sure it was still going to exist and stay stable. So now that I'm pretty sure that that's the case, we're going to talk about CachyOS. So before we jump in and take a look at this thing, if you leave a thumbs up on this video, I'd be really appreciative. It'd really help the channel. So let's first talk about the installation of this thing. So when I first decided to do this video, what I expected was the plain old vanilla Calamares installer. And while you do get a Calamares installer, it's not a vanilla version. They've actually done some work on it to make it very interesting. Now, this feels like an attempt to do some of what Arco Linux was doing back in its heyday without being, you know, too Arco about it, if you will. There's not a ton of things here for you to get confused on, but there's some extras there during the installation process that allow you to do some really interesting things before you actually get to your system. So you start off in your traditional way. You pick your location and your keyboard layout and your language and all that stuff. And then you get into things like being able to choose your desktop environment and your window manager. They have a wide selection of desktop environments and window managers. Now, on the first screen, you guys will see here in the B-roll, and I'll try to time it out right. I don't know if I will or not. You'll be able to see what you'll be able to choose just one desktop environment or window manager. In the next screen, there is a list of some software. Now, this is where it kind of deviates from Arco. Arco gave you everything. Like you had options for literally everything to install. This is much more pared down. It gives you options for an extra window manager or desktop environment, and it gives you an option to pare down some of the default installation programs. So things that you might not need. So you can kind of uncheck those if you want to, but it does allow you to install one extra window manager if you want to. Now, if you try to choose more than one, it will pop up and say, hey, you can only install two or something along those lines. Now, I'll talk more about how well that works in a bit, but just to know, can seem to pick two, and I think and I'm not sure about this, it limits you from one window manager and one desktop environment, but again, I may be wrong on that. So after that part of the installation process, we get to another very interesting part. So if you choose to erase the disk that you're installing on, it gives you an option of many different file systems to choose from. Now, this is interesting, not because it's very unique, but simply because they give you more options than basically anyone else. Now, the default is Btrfs. Thank you. That's what the default should be, of course. But it also allows you to do ZFS and ext4. And I also saw Bcachefs in there, which is the first time I've actually seen that out in the wild outside of the Linux mailing list or the kernel mailing list. So you can choose that if you wanted to live on the wild side. I obviously stayed with Btrfs, and I was very curious how they'd set it up, because we just covered CachyOS, who also uses Btrfs as a default, and they didn't set it up at all. They just used it, right? They didn't actually do anything with it. I wanted to find out how well CachyOS actually did this, you know, and we'll talk more about that later, but just spoiler alert, they did a really good job. So after that, it's just basically a regular install. You click next a couple times and it will install. It took approximately 3 or 4 minutes to install, nothing horrendous here. It does download some extra things, so not everything comes with it on the ISO. So if you choose extra things during installation, obviously it's also going to have to choose which desktop environment and download that, because it's not on the ISO. So you will have to have an internet connection for this to actually work. So let's go ahead then and talk about the first boot experience. So I'm actually going to show you a little bit of B-roll here first, and for a good reason, but basically what you'll get is in my case, I chose KDE Plasma as the desktop, and you'll get a slightly riced version, a slightly themed version, if you will, of Plasma. You'll have the CachyOS logo as the start menu icon, and then basically the rest of it looks like it's Breeze Dark. Now, I can't actually show you this because I didn't take a picture of it, but if you were to go into the settings, you'll see that it's telling you it's using Breeze Light for some reason. And I don't know why that is, but that's what it says. And the reason why I can't show you actually what that looks like is because once you change to a different theme, there's no way to get that original theme back. So what you guys are seeing now is what I'm left with now if I choose Breeze Dark. Now, if I actually go into the settings again, and we'll talk more about this welcome screen here in just a second, I'm just going to show you this. You can see the global themes. Originally, it tells you you're using Breeze Light, but this is not what you get out of the box. You actually get something that looks more like Breeze Dark, like this, but with the logo replaced. So I don't know why that is the way that it is. It doesn't really matter. I will say that this one here is installed, but they don't use it. So if I were to choose this is what the CachyOS Nord theme looks like. Why they don't use that out of the box, I'm not sure. They should, because that looks pretty awesome. But anyways, we'll just go ahead and leave it as that, because I do like that. But overall, that's the thing. I know that was completely out of order, but the first run experience is something that I couldn't find a way to get back. That theme, even though it was very lightly themed Breeze Dark, I could not find a way to get that back. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the welcome screen here for just a second. So this here is going to look familiar for anyone who's actually used Arco. Now, I don't know if it actually originated with Arco or not. I have no clue. I just know that this is what Arco's welcome screen kind of looked like in its later days. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great welcome screen, and it does a lot of things. So it gives you access to the documentation, a place to get support, a lot of the information on the project. But what we're really interested here is these last two things. So apps and tweaks will take you to another page, and it gives you some options for some tweaks, like profile sync daemon enabled. I don't know what that means. Systemd OOMD enabled. I don't know what that means. BPF tune enabled. I don't know what that means. I do know what Bluetooth enabled means, so 1 out of 5 there isn't bad. Anonymity CPP enabled. I don't know what that means. So I'm assuming somewhere in the documentation there's something about what any of this stuff means, but as far as I can tell, there's nothing actually on the operating system that tells me whether or not I should click those things. So I just ignored them. Now, the buttons here below them are all fairly explanatory. So you can do a system update, reinstall all the packages that you started off with, which is nice. Reset the key rings, which is something that you have to do on Arch from time to time. You can remove orphans here, rank the mirrors. You can install snapper support, which is weird because I'm pretty sure that it's already installed. We'll talk more about Btrfs here in a little while. You can install gaming packages, which will give you a pre-configured kind of Bazite style SteamOS kind of experience when it comes to gaming. You can do some debugging here. You can change the DNS server, which I actually did earlier. You can change this to Google if you wanted to and hit apply. It will ask you for your password. Now, one thing you guys probably didn't hear that, but every time the poll kit comes up, there's a very annoying ding that happens, which would annoy the crap out of me if I were actually using this. So that's just there. But anyways, you can obviously change the DNS server here, which is pretty damn cool. Not something that I've seen before. So there's that. So the tweaks and fixes are really cool. Now, one interesting thing we have going on here. So there are 2 different packages, well, actually 3 different package installers in use by CachyOS. So there's this one here, which will pop up another window. This is a custom thing that gives you access to a lot of packages and in categories nature. So this is kind of like PAMAC on Manjaro, kind of. They'll probably be very offended for me comparing it to PAMAC on Manjaro because PAMAC has such a bad reputation. But the idea here is a GUI that you can front end. Now, Discover is not installed at all. So if you are a KDE user and you're a fan of Discover, that thing is not here. So if you're interested in that, you'll have to install that on your own. This is just an access to the Arch repos if you want to use it. Now, it does have an uncategorized list of applications. Now, it doesn't seem to give you an option for the AUR, although it's possible that I'm just missing this. So as far as I can tell, this is just from a certain selection of the Arch repository, or maybe it's even a repository maintained by Cachy itself. So it's not everything you'd get if you were to stroll through both the AUR and the regular Arch Linux repositories. One of the reasons why, though, I said this was interesting, in one of 3 different package installers that they have on here, is they have this, which we just saw, but if we go back here and click Install Apps, we'll actually see another one, which is weird. It seems like that button would just pop this thing up, but it's different. You also notice that the categories are also different, or at least out of order. It looks like they might just be out of order. Nope, they're different ones. So some of them are the same, some of them are different. But the point is here is that these things are different. Also, if you go searching through the application menu, you'll find that Octopi is also here. So if you are a fan of Octopi, which I am not at all. This to me is the most confusing package manager in existence. Like, this thing here is just super confusing and definitely not user friendly. But I know there's a lot of people who like it. So the fact that there's 3 different ways upon starting this thing to install applications shows that they don't really have a way of doing this. The way that I feel is like, if you have to have 3 different ways of doing it, you don't have a way of doing it at all, because you just haven't made the decision. You choose one and stick with it. Personally, I like this one. I think that this is the one that they've put the most effort into. I think that this is the one that should be default. Have Octopi, I suppose, installed for other reasons. But I would say expand this one, make it available so you can have different repositories here if you want them. So if you want the AUR, you can have access to the AUR, and it's possible that, again, that it's there if you want it to, if you want it to be. I don't know. But anyways, I'd choose this one, and then when you press this button on the welcome screen, just pop this thing up. It'd be much better than having 3 different ways of doing it. It just feels not well put together. But honestly, that's not that big of a deal, but I just wanted to mention that. So that's the welcome screen and the ways of installing applications. I will also say that a lot of times when you see these kind of decisions where I say they're like, weird decisions, like having 3 package installers, a lot of times they do that for a reason, and I just don't know the reason. So if there is a technological reason for this, or maybe they're pulling from different repositories or whatever it is, that's fine. I just kind of wish it just makes it feel a little weird. So I just wanted to put that out there. So let's go ahead then move and talk a little bit about the website and who this thing is for, because when you create an Arch-based distro, one of the reasons why you do so is because you want it to be a more cohesive experience for the user when it comes to installation and usage. Now, I'm not quite sure if that's their goal here with CachyOS. They seem to want to have a lot of customizable in terms of things like kernels. We'll talk more about the kernel here in a few minutes, but have the ability to do a whole bunch of different things when it comes to gaming, and because they have a handheld version of this thing. So they have some very interesting ideas for who this thing is for, but they do say right here in the first paragraph, is designed to deliver lightning fast speeds and stability, ensuring a smooth and enjoyable computing experience for every time you use it. And this is the important part, whether you're a seasoned Linux user or just starting out, CachyOS is the ideal choice for those looking for a powerful, customizable, and blazingly fast operating system. Now, existing and seasoned users, I think, are fine. Even though there was a whole bunch of buttons there in the welcome screen that I have no clue what they actually did, you could look those kind of things up. And as an experienced Linux user, you're probably used to doing that kind of thing. But I will say this, if you scroll down just a little bit on their website and read some of the things they list as features. So let me read some of these things and just try to put yourself in the mindset of someone who's used a little bit of Linux, but hasn't used a ton of stuff, right? You know how to install some things. Maybe you've used regular Arch before, or maybe you used another Arch-based distro like Endeavor or whatever. You haven't been here a long time, but you've been around enough to know some things. But still, you come across this. Enhanced your performance with optimized package. CachyOS does compile packages with the x86-64v3, x86-64-v4, and Zen 4 instruction set and LTO to provide a higher performance. Core packages also get PGO and BLT optimization. If anybody wants to tell me what half of that shit means, I would be happy to hear it, I suppose, because I have no clue what PGO and BOLT stand for. I'm assuming it has something to do with the kernel and CPU instructions. I'm just guessing. I'm not sure. I'm not smart enough for that. So let's read the next one. CachyOS offers different environments. So that one's actually fairly reasonable. It tells you that it offers Wayland compositors and X11 window managers and Plasma. That's pretty there. But then we go over to the next one over here. It says CachyOS utilizes the Bohr scheduler for better interactivity and offers a variety of scheduler options, including EEVDF, SCED, EXT, Echo, and RT. All kernels are compiled with optimized x86-64v3, x86-64v4, Zen 4 instructions, and LTO to be optimized for your CPU. I understand the last 6 words. Some of it in between, but still, definitely not a set of language that you'd expect being pointed towards someone who's new to Linux. Now, again, if you are doing a distro and you're not aiming it for new users, that's fine. But even I've been using Linux for 10 years. I don't know what half of that stuff means. Okay, so I'm not a new user, and yet I am still very confused over their website. So we don't need to read any more of it, but the whole website is kind of like that. Even their documentation oftentimes comes across as very technical. So just this is the very first page. If you go to their wiki, it says CachyOS offers a large selection of optimized packages. All right, I understood that bit. For various hardware configurations, including x86-64v3, x86-64v4, Zen 4 systems to overall performance. I will say they've done a little bit better job, but still there's a lot of techno speak here that could be confusing for people who are, not up on the jargon, if you will. So I wanted to cover that before anything else, just simply because it kind of stood out to me. Now, again, maybe this distro just isn't for new users. That's fine. I'd go into a lot of these things assuming that there are going to be new users that are going to be attracted to this, simply because, and especially this one, simply because a lot of people use this. A lot of people use CachyOS, and people see the cool logo and the cool theming, the customization. Maybe they come from SteamOS and hear that CachyOS is good for gaming, and then they get on here and find the website is all this very technical Linuxy kind of stuff, and maybe they're a little bit turned away. So I wanted to cover that before I jump into anything else, but we'll move on now. So let's talk about pre-installed applications. There's not many. So if you don't go through and install them yourself, you're going to get things like Meld and Micro are here, which a lot of people will be happy to see Micro. Kate's here, which is part of the KD package. You'll have Gwenview, you'll have Firefox, you'll have Haruna, MPV. I install Audacity, so ignore that one. You will have Alacrity, Btop, Btrfs Assistant, which we'll talk about here in a second, the Kernel Manager, which is one of their custom tools, the package installer, which I've shown you, Dolphin, obviously, Fish, which we'll talk about the shells here in just a second as well, and then some more of the KDE regular utilities, and then Octopi and some Octopi stuff. That's basically what you'll get. There's not much more here. There's some extra stuff like PyCom, but I'm assuming that comes with BSPWM, which we'll talk more about BSPWM here in just a second, because I did during the install choose both KDE and BSPWM because I wanted to see kind of how they handled that. I will say and give them 100% credit for they install Vim right out of the box, so good on you guys. That's the way that it should be. So in terms of pre-install applications, there's not a ton of stuff here, and I think that that's great. I think that you want to have it so that the user basically controls all that stuff, and that's just kind of the way that it should be. So there's that. So let's go ahead then and talk about Btrfs. So if we go here to System and then Btrfs Utilities, or Btrfs Assistance, excuse me, it'll ask for a password, and then we'll get this thing. Now, it doesn't follow the theme, but I don't care about that. This is, I'm pretty sure that this is a Fedora project, or at least Fedora has a version of this. Basically, what this allows you to do is it allows you to control a lot of your Btrfs settings, take snapshots, and so much more. So it gives you some stats here on the front page about how you're using your file system. It allows you to do a scrub and a balance if you want to start balancing. It allows you to look at the subvolume. So here is where CachyOS shines, because one of the ways Btrfs is supposed to work, and I'm looking at you, everyone other than OpenSUSE, is you're supposed to have separate subvolumes for separate things. So you're supposed to have a cache and a home and a log and a root and an SRV and a temp and a dot snapshots. That's the way that it's supposed to work. Now, if you look at the documentations, they'll say you can basically just do it with an @rootfs subvolume or whatever. You can theoretically do it that way, but if you're going to use Snapper or if you're going to use Timeshift, you have to have it set up the way that it's supposed to be set up, which is like this with all of these subvolumes. Now, the reason why I care about that is because Snapper is pre-installed and it actually works. Now, this is going to look a little bit different for you guys out of the box because I've actually set this up. I wanted to see how well it worked. So if you go into Snapper settings, you can actually, first you'll want to select a config or create one, which I've created one and called it main. And it basically then allows you to enable timeline snapshots. You can tell it how many of each kind to save. So I've just chose some random numbers. I've enabled the Snapper timeline enabled, Snapper cleanup enabled, Snapper boot enabled. So all of these things will allow you to get to your snapshots from certain places. It will clean them up. It will enable the actual processing of them. So you want to have that all set up. You hit save, and you go back over here, you'll actually be able to see that I've had this running for a little while, and it's actually taken 3 brand new snapshots. They're here. Now, if I wanted to, I could browse and restore them, and everything you'd want to be able to do with your snapshots. That's fantastic. It is so damn good. In fact, I would go so far as to say, and you guys know how big of an OpenSUSE fan I am, this is better than Btrfs. This is better in terms of Btrfs setup than OpenSUSE, and I thought OpenSUSE did it the best. But this is better because Btrfs Assistant is actually installed and works really well. You can't, as far as I know, actually install Btrfs Assistant on OpenSUSE. I might be wrong about that, but I have a vague recollection of trying to install something like this and it not working, so it's possible that I'm just misremembering that, but still, this is the way Btrfs should work and should be set up. Able to be used is the way that it should be set up. And the vast majority of distros, which there aren't that many to begin with, but the ones that use it, Fedora, CachyOS is one that I looked at recently, obviously. Both of those for sure. They just don't set it up right. They use it, but they don't set it up right. So you can hardly even use it the way that it's supposed to be used. So kudos to CachyOS for actually doing it this way. Good job, guys. That's just a premier feature. It's very, very good. So let's talk about kernels here for a second. If you go into the system here again and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the CachyOS kernel manager. Now, PicoOS obviously also already did this. I know Manjaro does this. A couple other ones do this as well. So if you want to use a different kernel, you can do that if you want to. Now, in traditional CachyOS fashion, this is much more technical than the one that's on Pico, where it just kind of gave you the kernels and stuff. This one here has different names, so you're kind of not exactly sure what you're getting. So you do get the version number here, but the package name is not anything you're probably going to recognize, and that makes it harder to choose which one you want. So like there's multiple versions of 16.6.1-1. Which one are you supposed to actually choose? Now it shows you stable, LTO optimized, but again, you have to know what that means. Now, kernel deviation isn't going to be something that new users are going to want to do anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. So, but if a new user were to stumble in here, I highly recommend them to not touch anything unless they know what they do. I would really like them to put a warning up here saying that, like, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, maybe don't come in here and mess around. Now, I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption, I'm not going to test it, that if you were to try to uninstall the kernel that you are using and not install something to replace it, I'm assuming that there's something in there that say, hey, bozo, don't do that. I'm assuming that that's the case. Like I said, I'm not going to test it to find out because that would be, detrimental to my being able to finish this video. But, I'm assuming that that's the case. I hope that that's the case. But anyways, you can change to a different kernel if you want to do that. The last thing that I want to talk about in terms of how this thing comes out of the box before we get to conclusions is that it comes with 3 different shells installed. And it's not just that it comes with 3 different shells installed. First off, it comes with fish out of the box. So if you're into fish and you like fish, it comes with fish out of the box, and it's customized. You'll get the benefits of fish if you want to. Interestingly, though, it also has ZSH. And they've done some customization to ZSH, kind of. They allow you to do it. So they have things like power level 10,000 installed. And if you were to go through this, you'd actually, get an actual fully fledged ZSH prompt and everything that goes along with it, icons and stuff like that. So it's possible that they're using something like Oh My ZSH or something like that. I'm not sure about that, but it's somewhat odd that they have multiple shells installed. So if you actually type in bash, you can get to bash here as well. Now, having bash on top of fish or whatever would make sense. Being able to go back and forth, you want one POSIX compliant shell on the system. But the fact that they've also included ZSH is interesting when everything else kind of feels minimal. So just something that I noticed. Overall, I think it's cool that it's there, and I do like that they use fish out of the box. Not a lot of distributions use fish out of the box, and I think that it's a shame because fish is actually pretty good. I don't particularly use it myself, but it's still a very good shell. So let's go ahead then and wrap up just a little bit. So there are some extra things that you should know. First off, they do have multiple versions of this, so you can get the handheld version, which would install on your Steam Deck if you wanted to use that. I didn't actually have a chance to install it on my Steam Deck. I'm a little weary of overriding SteamOS. It works so well that I don't want to put anything else on there. But if you are, more adventurous than I am, you can go through and install it on your handheld. You can also find some other versions of this as well. But most of the stuff that you're probably going to want to see is with that initial ISO where you can make those choices that we talked about earlier in the installer. So a couple things. First off, this is not a new user distro, but I don't think that they actually meant it to be. I think that if they took out that one line on their website talking about new users, I probably wouldn't have had any of the problems that I talked about when it comes to techno speak, right? If that had been completely wiped out, everything else is fine because you're aiming it toward seasoned Linux users. And if as a seasoned Linux user, I don't know what you're talking about, that's on me instead of, it being on the developer. So there's that. But other than that, this is a fantastic Arch-based distro. I was thinking this as I was testing this out. This feels like a successor to Arco. Now, it doesn't do as much as Arco does, and you don't have the catalog of very new user-friendly documentation that Eric put out for Arco, but a lot of the bones are here of a distribution that is very much interested in allowing you to customize both pre-install and post-install, and I think that that's really good. Now, it's obviously not unique in that nature. A lot of other Arch-based distros do this as well, but they've done it in such a way that isn't too overwhelming, and I like that. So it doesn't give you all of the options that Arco did, but it gives you some of them. It does limit you during that install of to just a couple different window managers in desktop environments, but I don't think that that's a big deal. Most people aren't going to want to go through like me and install all the window managers, and if you wanted to do that, obviously you could do it later. So I will actually show you one last thing before I hop out of here. I did install BSPWM. So if we go back to my setup here and I log out and hit log out again, you can go away and then try to switch to BSPWM. Now watch this actually work and enter my password. Like so, I get a black screen. Now, what I thought was the reason why is because I chose a Wayland desktop environment, which is Plasma, and I chose an X11 version of a window manager. So maybe those things just aren't compatible. So a lot of times when you're switching from Wayland to X11 or X11 to Wayland, you have to reboot in order for things to work because you're changing portals, right? Well, I rebooted and I got this exact thing and I have no clue why. Now, I didn't troubleshoot at all. I do notice that the blinking cursor up in the upper left-hand corner goes away and comes back and goes away and comes back. Right now, it seems to have gone away. Why this particular problem happens, maybe you're really only supposed to choose one, in which case I'd tell the developers to somehow figure out a way during installation when you choose one to not offer you another choice. So during installation there, you were able to choose one, and then in the next page over, it allowed you to choose another one if you wanted to. So I just assumed I could install another one if I wanted to, and I did that, and I'm with this experience here. So it's also possible, and I want to just kind of note this, that this could be a virtual machine problem. because I am running this in a virtual machine, so maybe it's possible that that's the reason why I'm having a problem. So, you know, maybe it's not a bug at all. Maybe it's just what I'm running it on. So just, I wanted to point that out just in case. So I think Cachy or whatever the hell you call it is very, very good. I think it's one of the best Arch-based distributions that I've tried in a long while, and I can see why a lot of people really, really like it. So if you are interested in Arch but don't quite want the pure vanilla, do-it-yourself kind of thing Arch experience, Cachy is one of the choices that you should take a look at. So that's it for this one. If you have thoughts on this, you can leave comments in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me on Mastodon. That link will be in the video description. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/thelinuxcast. There you'll find a weekly exclusive podcast. I just uploaded one yesterday where I talked about my 40th day on NixOS and some of the problems that I've been having. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, where I just kind of ramble on about some Linux topics, you can go support me on Patreon or on the YouTube members page or whatever it is here on YouTube. So check that out. If you want to support me and get something physical in return, you can go to my merch store where you can get hats like this one. That's shop.thelinuxcast.org. There's other things there other than hats, t-shirts and backpacks and desk mats and all sorts of stuff. All the proceeds from there go directly towards helping me make more Linux content for you guys. So thanks everybody who has done that. Thanks to everybody who does support me on Patreon and YouTube. You guys are all absolutely amazing. Without you, the channel just would not be anywhere near where it is right now. So thank you so very, very, very much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. Just thank you guys so very, very much. So that's going to be it for me today. I appreciate you coming along for the ride as I look at CachyOS for the first time. Today was actually the first time I've installed this, so color me very impressed. So that's it for me today. I hope you have a wonderful one, and I'll see you next time.